بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. For the past 2-3 days we've been looking at what is termed in Arabic as haya, and yesterday we looked at 1 or 2 examples from the life of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another example from the life of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is 2 ahadith. One is إذا أراد البراز انطلق حتى لا يراه أحد. As mentioned, I think yesterday or the day before, in those days, the houses, they did not have any toilets, etc. So a person, if he wanted to relieve himself or herself, they would have to go at a distance into some sort of area which was probably designated for this, and they would relieve themselves there. Regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a sahabi, he narrates that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would want to relieve himself, انطلق حتى لا يراه أحد. He would basically walk and he would distance himself in a manner that no one could see him. حتى لا يراه أحد. No one could see him. Why? Because this was the demand of haya. This was the demand of haya. And not just that, another hadith, إذا أراد الحاجة لم يرفع ثوبه حتى يدنو من الأرض. That when Prophet ﷺ, when the call of nature came, and first of all he would distance himself, like we learned from the previous hadith. The second thing is that لم يرفع ثوبه. He would basically not lift his garments until he was close to the ground. حتى يدنو من الأرض. And this was despite the fact that he'd already distanced himself so much that nobody could see him. You know, if the norm was that people went to a particular spot or they had a particular distance, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go beyond that, number one. And secondly, despite that privacy already being there, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would only basically lift his clothes, etc. He would only uncover what was necessary when he was close to the ground. حتى يدنو من الأرض. So this shows us that the level of haya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, and it also shows us and tells us and teaches us that haya is not just for when we are in public. Haya is also for those moments of our life which we spend in privacy, in seclusion. Like here, there is nobody there to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Despite that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is so careful that he only basically reveals his aura, etc., when he is close to the ground. Hatta yadnuwa min al-ard. You know, even extra precaution. So from this we clearly learn that haya is not just for our public life, it's also there for our private life as well. Another example is the example of Uthman radiyallahu anhu. We mentioned yesterday that he is the one that even the angels around him are shy because of his nature, because of his bashful nature. And Uthman radiyallahu anhu is that sahabi that even before he accepted Islam, you know, he was, his character was such that it was moral and upright. And I'll just give you 1 or 2 examples. For example, before Islam, you know, before, obviously there was no question after accepting Islam, but even before Islam, he had never ever committed zina, adultery, which at that time was rife in Arabia. And secondly, neither had he ever killed someone even before accepting Islam, i.e. in the period termed as Jahiliyyah. And again, this was something which was rife. People would, there was so much tribal rivalry and there was so much tribal pride that sometimes over minor small issues, tribes would fight each other for years and years and years. In fact, they would leave behind a wasiyah that make sure, for a wasiyah for their children, that make sure you continue with the struggle. Don't back down, basically. Otherwise, Urdu mein kehte hain hamara naak kat jayega. Otherwise, we are going to be looked down upon and our tribe will be put to shame, basically. So despite all this, Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala, naturally, even before Islam, he had a moral, upright character. And just on this, Hazrat Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she narrates an incident that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in my house, mudtaji'an, kind of just relaxing, lying down. And when a person, when he is in his house, in seclusion, etc., normally you don't have sometimes, like for example, ourselves, in the house, you're not going to be wearing your jabba 24/7. You might be in a t-shirt, for example. Okay? You might be in your pajamas, that type of thing. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was one day relaxing in his house, and basically his, call it thighs or legs, they were somewhat exposed, basically. His awra was not exposed, maybe up to his knees, whatever, something like that. Some ahadith say kashifan an fakhiday, others say awsaqay. Saq is basically this area, what you call the shin. So that was maybe exposed up to the knee. What happened is, fasta'dhana Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he came and he sought permission that I would like to come in. So permission was given to him, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam still remained in the same state, basically that he was relaxing and his shin maybe up to the knee was exposed. Then Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who came. He also knocked and sought permission to come in, and again he was granted permission to come in, and he came, sat down, and وَكَذَلِكَ, meaning وَهُوَ عَلَى تِلْكَ الْحَالِ, Prophet remained in the same position, the same posture, the shins, etc. were exposed. Then what happens is, Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala knocks, and he seeks permission to come in. When he comes in, before he comes in, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sits up, وَسَوَّى ثِيَابَهُ, and he basically straightens his clothes, and that shin which was exposed maybe up to the knee, etc., he quickly covers it. And Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala, who's behind the veil, she observes all this. And when everybody is gone, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she asks Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she was, mashallah, a very intelligent woman despite her young age. To the extent that some scholars, they say that 1/3 of our deen, we have received it through her. She is also one of the very few narrators who narrates over 1,000 ahadith. She's probably the only female narrator, and only from a handful, there's only about 8, 9, 10 sahaba who narrate that many ahadith or more, basically, and she is one of them. So you can just see that she's observant. She observes all this, and she's not a passive observer. She observes all this with interest, thinking that Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala who came, and then Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who came, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he remained seated in the same manner. But the moment Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu comes, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, immediately he sits up. Immediately he sits up. And he basically straightens his clothes, etc. So she asks that, دَخَلَ أَبُو بَكْرَ وَدَخَلَ عُمَرْ وَلَمْ تُبَالِهِ, and you did not basically, give that much attention. But when Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu came, you quickly sat up, فَجَلَسْتَ وَسَوَّيْتَ ثِيَابَكَ, and you straightened your clothes. So what was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's reply? That أَلَا أَسْتَحْيِي مِنْ رَجُلٍ تَسْتَحْيِي مِنْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, أَلَا أَسْتَحْيِي مِنْ رَجُلٍ تَسْتَحْيِي مِنْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, should I not be shy from that person from whom even the angels feel shy? Subhanallah. This was the nature of Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that even the angels who would be around him, they would basically feel shy because of his nature. Sometimes when we see someone and maybe we go somewhere and we are being served by a female and, she is observant of basically haya, modesty, she lowers her gaze, instantly that has an effect on us. It has an effect on the opposite person. If you have any iota of basically what we call in Urdu, imani harara inside you basically, if you have the heat of iman inside you, immediately that would force you to also kind of, conduct yourself in a better manner and lower your gaze as well. So this was the nature of Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that people around him, they would be forced to adopt haya, etc., because of his character and nature. Just moving on to another example from the lives of the Sahaba is the example of none other than Aisha radiyallahu anha. You all know that Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, her living quarters were adjacent to Masjid Nabawi. And obviously later on, as Masjid Nabawi expanded, her living quarters were incorporated inside the masjid. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he left this world, basically he was laid to rest in her quarters. And what she did was, it was a small room, so she basically put a curtain in between, basically, the bit that was left now for living quarters and between the resting place of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then obviously, once Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala an, he passed away, and he was also laid to rest next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, there was no issue. The people who were, adjacent to her, one was none other than her husband, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the other person was none other than her father, Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala an. So she says that كنت أدخل في بيتي الذي دفن فيه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأبي فأضع ثوبي فأقول إنما هو زوجي وأبي. That whenever I used to enter that side of the living quarters where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was resting, and later on Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was resting, I basically would dress, casually, but like a person normally would dress inside the house. The hair could have been exposed, the face could have been exposed, the arms, etc. So she used to dress casually, because these people, when they were alive, they were basically not her non-mahrams, they were her mahrams basically. One was none other than her husband, and the other was basically her own father, Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala. But she says that فَلَمَّا دُفِنَ عُمَرُ مَعَهُمْ, when Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who was martyred, the moments before he left this world, he made a request. He made a request that send this message to Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, that I would like to be buried next to my companion Abu Bakr and next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Hazrat Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, from the goodness of her heart, she gave permission. And she said at that time that I really had reserved this last place for myself. There was only one more space left for one more qabr, one more grave. She said that I had reserved this for my own self. However, on the request of the Khalifa, I am giving him permission that he can be laid to rest here. Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who knew that these were his final moments. He was not going to basically, see the day, see out the day basically. And he passed away that very morning. But coming to our basically objective, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala, she says that فَلَمَّا دُفِنَ عُمَرُ مَعَهُمْ فَوَاللَّهِ مَا دَخَلْتُ إِلَّا وَأَنَا مَشْدُودَةٌ عَلَيَّ ثِيَابِي حَيَاءً مِّنْ عُمَرٍ. That after Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who was laid to rest, I never ever entered that side of the living quarters except that I was completely clothed. Completely. Nothing from me would be exposed. And we're not talking about people here who are still alive. Yeah, these are people who've left this world. Despite that, she says, I was fully clothed and I had my veil on basically. Why? Haya'an min Umar. Because Umar radiyallahu ta'ala who is buried here, he is not my mahram, and out of haya, basically, I am doing this. This is a great lesson for us, for our women as well, that, murdo ke saath itni ihtiyat. This is people who are not living, people who've left this world, but there is so much caution in the actions of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She was extremely conscious of herself, and she made sure that not just in her lifetime there was a barrier between her and non-mahrams, there was a barrier between her and non-mahrams even after their demise as well. Really important lesson we learn from this. And just to conclude today, the best example we can get is from, the father of all fathers, Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. When Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was put into Jannah, he was given a companion, Hawa radiyallahu anha. What happened? They were given certain instructions that you can eat from here and you can't eat from here. And what happened is that obviously Shaitan, Iblis, who had been banished from the heavens, he was obviously seeking revenge, and he wanted Adam alayhi salatu wasalam to commit basically an error so that Adam alayhi salatu wasalam may also be banished from the heavens as well. So obviously you all know the incident, you've heard it many times. Eventually he gets through to Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, and when they eat from that tree whose fruit was forbidden, what happens? فَلَمَّا ذَاقَ الشَّجَرَةَ بَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا. Immediately their satar, their aura, their body, it becomes exposed. What happens is that وَطَفِقَا يَخْصِفَانِ عَلَيْهِمَا مِنْ وَرَقِ الْجَنَّةِ. Adam alayhi salam and his wife, immediately they feel haya and shame. Immediately, the moment their aura is exposed because of this action, straight away, what do? They start covering themselves, with the large leaves from the trees of Jannah. Basically, it's an instinctive reaction. Nobody had to tell them. Nobody had to tell them that you need to cover your aura. It was an instinctive reaction that they immediately started to cover themselves with the leaves of the trees of Jannah. This is again a great example for us that, haya is not something that we can just it's not something we can just adopt overnight. It takes time. It should be instinctive. It should be natural. It should be based upon fitra, basically. And just to conclude today on the topic of haya, I'll just give you, one or two little examples that, which some of us might not even reflect upon or think anything of it. One little example is that nowadays people go on holidays, and at one time the hot destination used to be that place in Egypt. What is it called? That's the one. Sharm. Uska naam hi Sharm hai. Okay, Sharm al-Sheikh. But now what's the hot destination? Come on, tell me. Dubai Sharif. There you are. Dubai Sharif. When people go to these destinations, okay, normally, where do you go? What do you expose yourself to? The beach. That's where people go. Having a holiday on the beach, ye to goro ka tarika hai. Yeah? They go to Spain, they sit on the beach all day, having a bit of a tan, getting drunk, doing dhamal, etc. What happens is, you go to Dubai, yeah, you spend all that money, you feel obliged that I've got to sit on that beach as well. And what is on that beach? It's full of nudity. And not only are we exposing ourselves to this nudity, who do we have with us? Our young innocent children. Yeah? 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, and even maybe worse, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And we are exposing themselves to women who are basically not dressed appropriately. In fact, they are not dressed at all. So we should think to ourselves that, hang on, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm sure somebody will come to me afterwards and say, Mullah, you're very old-fashioned. Yeah? Basically, because this is the status quo. Nobody thinks about this. Yeah? You're going to Dubai, you're going to other destinations, you're going on the beach, because it's become so it's normalized so much that if anybody mentions what I am mentioning, he's old-fashioned. He's basically, not with it. Basically, he's not with the times. Ya Allah, just think to yourself, What are you exposing yourself to? And what are you exposing your children to? Basically, you're exposing them to basically indecency, nudity, obscenity. And young boys, etc., they are exposed to these things. Do you not think that, things are going to go through their mind? Yeah? If basically we as adults are affected, of course our teenage children are going to be affected as well. And even those who are younger than them. Wallahi, sometimes we underestimate the maturity of our children. In fact, we don't even know the reality of who our children are, what their mentality is, etc. Wallahi. In madrasa sometimes we have certain incidents, and when they put forward to the parents say, oh, this is impossible, it can't be my son. And I know straight away that this parent is totally detached from reality. They're in Kakulan. Wallahi, they have no idea of who their child is and the level of maturity that child has, basically. Because, maybe those type of conversations have never taken place. Maybe these things have never crossed your mind. You've just left it. And you don't even realize how advanced your own child is, the very child who lives with you. So this is food for thought. That, next time you want to go somewhere, go to those places, go to those destinations which give you some benefit as well. It benefits your deen, it benefits your iman, etc. Don't go to these places, wallah, that, it rips out the iman from within us and our children. Another example is, the demand of haya is, a person goes to see a doctor. A person, he or she goes to see a doctor. Generally, you want to be seen by a doctor of the same gender. If you are a male, you want to be seen by a male doctor. If our mothers, our sisters, they go to a doctor, they should demand to be seen by a female doctor. And this is not a demand that is just from the Muslim community. Even the non-Muslims, they demand this. A few years ago, I don't know, some of you will remember, in the NHS, NHS is absolutely crazy, okay, in all aspects. They've got their problems with their appointments and backlogs, but they've got lots of other problems as well. Like they had that clinic in London for gender change for children, which had to be closed down, etc. So this is just another example of, political correctness in the NHS. What did they want it to do in the wards? Does anybody remember? Mixed wards, yes. All in the name of equality, right? What they wanted to do is that males and females, they would be in the same ward. So, in a ward, you usually have 6 beds, okay? So, 2-3 could be males, and in that same ward, basically, 2-3 could be females. So, 2-3 males, 2-3 females. But there was such an uproar. Thankfully, there was such an uproar, not just from our community. Hum log to bilkul, we don't make any uproar. We're the best of the best. The only time we might make uproar is hamare ghar paise ja rahe hai. ठीक है? The non-Muslim community, they stood up and they said, we're not having this. What do you mean mixed wards? Okay? There was such an uproar, NHS backed down. And alhamdulillah, when you go to the hospital, you still see, separate wards. You have wards next to each other, but this one just for males, this one just for females, etc., etc. Which person would want to go to hospital? When you're in hospital, you're in a bed, you're not well, you're constantly, doctors are seeing you, you might be given injections, this, that, and the other. You're not properly clothed as well. So in that state, do you want our mothers, our sisters to be in the same ward as some other blokes, basically? No, you don't. You don't want them to be. So seeing a doctor, from the same gender, it should be our, what we call, just Urdu mein bolte, taqaza, iman or haya ka taqaza. That basically it should be a demand from the haya which we have within us, that I want to be seen by a male doctor or I want to be seen by a female doctor. And this is very important because, okay, it might be 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000, but we do hear about cases where the abuse takes place. When male doctors, they see female patients, etc., abuse takes place. It's in the news all the time. It's in the news all the time. Another example is, from in our deen, there is no such thing as expressions of what we call public affection. our deen, our haya, our iman, it does not allow us, for example, a husband and wife to kiss in public, basically. For the non-Muslims, for those who live in the Western world, this is a norm. This is a norm, basically. And you'll see even non-Muslim people, when they are exposed to this with their children, they try to shield their children from this. So this is not just something us as Muslims we need to think and be aware of. Even non-Muslims are conscious of this. And I'll just give you a small example that many years ago, I was in Palestine. I visited Palestine, and we were living in the old city. And I still remember this incident very clearly, that we were basically, I think, going for Salah. And, in the old city, you've got all those shops basically dotted around left and right. And we were going for Salah, and there was this, European couple there, a man and a woman. And they started kissing in public. Immediately the Palestinian shopkeepers, they created an uproar and they told them off. You don't do this here. Yeah, they severely told them off. I'm not just saying lightly. They severely reprimanded them and said, no, you don't do this in our land, in our city, in our area. And they sent them packing. I still remember this incident really clearly, that we don't want any of this nonsense on our doorstep in our community, basically. And they sent these two people packing. Obviously, if this was in a European country, obviously you wouldn't be able to do much. Immediately you will be labeled as a terrorist, extremist, orthodox, God knows, whatever other labels which are out there. But, these are things that we need to think about, when we go on holiday. Why are we going on the beach for? What are we going to get beach? If you really wanted the sun, just go to India, Pakistan. Go back home, man. Stay there in June, July, August. You'll get all the vitamin D and all the sun you want. Okay? Why are we going to a beach for? Why are we going to expose our children to nudity, etc.? These are things which we need to think about. And next time, you decide to go somewhere, this should be your consideration. Not just the price of the tickets that, we'll bunk off 2-3 days of school and 2-3 days of madrasa, we'll save 300-400 quid, let's fly off to Dubai. No. Your consideration should be that, am I going to a place which is going to affect the iman of my family, my children, etc. That should be our first and foremost consideration. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon what has been said, and Allah give us the ability to have the quality of haya inside us and also inside our families. Ameen. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik.